We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Strategic ambiguity, or just plain old ambiguity, courtesy of the president who can't keep his administration on the same page. What damage has Joe Biden done to American interests with his latest outburst? Well, to help us fathom that particular question, we're joined by expert on all things defense, Mr. Dave Patterson. Welcome back, Dave.
Thank you, Mark. Great to be with you.
So President Biden made a clear declaration that if China goes after Taiwan, the U.S. is ready to step in. What's wrong with this statement?
Well, it's
in 100 words or less.
Yes. Well, where do I begin? It's a statement that gives the impression that we've changed our China policy from one China to a two China policy, in where we will indeed come to Taiwan's aid should that be necessary.
Why is this such an important measure for China? I mean, isn't the fact that Joe Biden's saying one thing and his administration is saying another, because they were quick to once again clarify the president's remarks? Isn't this setting up either red flags or go pistols for the Chinese government?
Well, the Chinese government has to be a bit confused, because every time, and this is about the fourth time that President Biden has said this, that, pretty soon they're going to start to believe that he actually means it. And but as soon as he says something like that, his staff, faster than you can say, he said what, gets out a clarification. And that's got to be confusing. But interestingly enough, Newt Gingrich came out, the former Speaker of the House, and said, his instincts are right. And we should be very upfront and clear to the Chinese that we would defend Taiwan should they decide to attack it.
All right. Now, as you point out, this certainly isn't the first time that Joe Biden has been, let's call it, out of step with his administration. I think what everybody really wants to know is why? Why do we have two separate visions of what America's position is? And I guess more importantly, who is running the country?
Well, that's a good question. I think that...
But should it be a good question, Dave? Shouldn't the answer be quite simply the president? Isn't that how it goes?
Well, in most administrations, you would say that. I mean, in most administrations, you have a common voice on matters critical to geopolitics. And in this case, it's not. And you'll recall back when President Biden was talking about the Ukraine, his instinct was that, a minor incursion wouldn't be so bad. Maybe they take Donbass, that's okay. And our sanctions on them would reflect a less strong approach. Well, immediately everybody came out and said, no, especially the Ukrainians, I might add, who found this somewhat disturbing. But it is really it's a pattern of the kinds of things that go on in the White House. And unfortunately, and I'm somewhat loath to say this, but one would think that Joe Biden either does not read his notes, but we know that he reads a teleprompter when it's available, and he's not keeping track of what the staff is saying to him. Or he doesn't care and he's going to go his own way. Either of those two circumstances is troubling for the rest of the world.
It kind of makes it builds. You and I always end up coming back to the odd conspiracy theory here and there, Dave. But it kind of bolsters the idea that there's a deep state who are running the show, and the president is just the front man. Now, we know from past history that really the president does have power, and the president's vision can make a big difference. We've seen that for the last, pretty much every president to date. But yet when you have somebody like Joe Biden who is being, I use this word again, clarified by members of his staff, members of the White House and the administration, for almost every pronouncement that he makes, it must feed into the idea that there's a deep state running the president.
Well, it does, but more important, I think, is that this discontinuity that is clear within the White House causes the rest of those who are watching to choose sides. The New York Times today said, Biden's right, and which is kind of unusual about, the New York Times discarding the one China policy, but nonetheless, they took the stance of supporting the president. And that's what we would like to do. But with this president, sometimes it's not that easy.
It seems to me, Dave, that despite the fourth estate trumpeting that the adults are back in charge, we're living through a fear and loathing White House edition. Now, is the world really looking on and thinking that the United States is a reliable partner during this administration?
I think not. I think that quite the contrary is the case, that they wait to see what the United States is going to do versus what they say. And that's a very, very troubling set of circumstances, because so often the president says one thing, the national security advisor says something totally different. Or in the case of this is an administration that is quite confusing. You had the case of Secretary Blinken said, oh yes, MiG-29s to Ukraine, perfectly okay. And within 72 hours, the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, said, no, we're not doing that. I mean, the world leaders have to be, perplexed.
Yeah, it seems that world leaders can be forgiven anything except indecisiveness. Dave Patterson, thank you ever so much.
Thank you, Mark. Happy to be with you.
You're listening to Liberty Nation Radio, heard across the Radio America network from our flagship station in the nation's capital, WWRC in Washington, D.C. Later on, we talk all things liberty. But up next, after this short break, why do schools think they own your kids? Coming right up. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
We're doing it for real, really real. Liberty Nation.
And Jeff Charles, contributor for LibertyNation.com.
I think we're starting to make an impact. Liberty style, fighting for freedom.
The tracking poll sponsored by Liberty Nation for Thursday.
Mentioned by Dan Bongino, Rasmussen, Jordan Peterson, and
I
others.
can do it again if you want me to.
Cited in Mark Levin's American Marxism.
I think we're starting to make a really big impact. Get noticed. We're doing it. Rock on. I'm gone.